Before the story begins, please drop a comment and let us know where you're listening from, whether it's here in the U.S. or anywhere else in the world. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so this channel can keep growing and bring you even more compelling stories. It was 11:10 at night. My husband slapped me because dinner wasn't on the table. He screamed, "Get in there and cook something, now." I stayed silent and walked into the kitchen. For 20 minutes, they waited. When I returned with a covered platter, they thought it was a delicious meal. But when I lifted the silver lid, the contents weren't food, but a one-way ticket to their own personal hell on earth. The grandfather clock in the living room chimed 11:10 p.m. Outside, the street was plunged into a deep suburban silence, broken only by the soft crunch of my tires on the asphalt of the driveway. My body ached. I'd spent the entire day at the office, battling mountains of audit reports that had to be ready by morning. My head throbbed with a piercing pain, like a hammer striking the same spot over and over. Still, I forced a faint smile. I pictured the plush, king-sized bed waiting for me. All I wanted was a hot shower and an uninterrupted night of sleep. I killed the engine and trudged toward the front door. The house keys jingled in my hand, which trembled slightly from exhaustion. As I opened the door, a blast of cold air from the central AC hit my face. Strange. Normally, the living room lights were off by this time, but tonight the entire space was lit up, bright and sterile. A bad feeling washed over me. I stopped dead in the doorway when I saw them. 3 figures perched on the living room sofa, their expressions unreadable. Kevin, my husband, sat in the middle, legs crossed arrogantly. To his right was Sharon, my mother-in-law, her sharp, accusatory eyes fixed on me. And to his left, Tiffany, my sister-in-law, was scrolling on her phone, occasionally flicking a cynical smirk in my direction. Before I could even say hello, Kevin shot up and stalked toward me. His face was red with anger, his jaw clenched tight. I could see the veins bulging in his neck, a sure sign he was about to explode. "Honey, I just got in, I didn't finish the sentence." A sharp, stinging slap landed on my left cheek. The sound was so crisp, it shattered the nightly silence of the house. A searing heat instantly spread across my face. My head snapped to the side from the force of the blow. I was frozen. The bone-deep weariness I'd felt moments ago vanished, replaced by overwhelming shock. My right hand trembled as I touched my cheek, which was already starting to feel numb. I looked at Kevin, searching his eyes for a flicker of remorse, but there was nothing, only the glint of explosive fury. "Have you seen the time, you useless bitch?" Kevin screamed, his face inches from mine. His spit sprayed my blouse. "Who do you think you are, waltzing in at this hour, out partying while your husband is at home?" I fought back the tears that threatened to spill. "Kevin, I was working overtime. You know it's the end of the quarter. I have a ton of work. Besides, I texted you this afternoon," I replied, my voice shaky but striving for calm. I wouldn't look weak in front of them. "Excuses," Sharon cut in, her voice shrill. She stood up from the sofa, pointing a finger at my face. "What kind of wife are you? We've been sitting here for an hour, starving. There's nothing on the table. The pots are empty. The fridge is just filtered water. Do you want your husband and me to starve to death?" Tiffany chimed in without looking up from her phone, as if I were less important than her social media feed. "A little self-awareness, maybe?" "Emily, Kevin is tired from being home all day. The least a wife can do when she gets home from work is bring food or cook, not come back empty-handed. God, so useless." I looked at them, one by one. Kevin, unemployed for the last 6 months after being fired for misappropriating company funds, though he always told the neighbors he was launching his own startup. Sharon, who asked me for thousands of dollars every month for her expenses and lunches at the country club, but was incapable of clearing a single dirty plate in this house. And Tiffany, a 25-year-old whose only job was to sleep, eat, and go on online shopping sprees with the supplementary credit card linked to my account. All of them lived off my hard work. All of them breathed under the roof of a house whose mortgage I paid every single month. And now they were screaming at me because I was late to make them dinner. "Get in the kitchen now!" Kevin roared again, this time shoving me hard by the shoulder. I stumbled back, crashing into the shoe rack by the door. "And don't come out until there's decent food on that table. And you better hope it's good, or I'll smash the plate in your face." I took a deep breath, trying to smother the rage that was beginning to burn in my chest. I wanted to scream, to vomit all the frustration I had bottled up for so long. I wanted to throw them out of my house that very instant, but no, rage would only ruin my plan. I needed to be calm to serve them their just desserts in the most painful way possible, an elegant revenge they would never, ever forget. I straightened my clothes and stood tall. I looked Kevin directly in the eye. There was no fear or sadness in my gaze anymore, only an empty coldness. "All right," I said, my voice low but firm. "I'm going to prepare a special dish for you, the one you deserve most tonight." Without waiting for a response, I walked past Kevin, ignoring Sharon's contemptuous glare and Tiffany's mocking laugh. I walked straight to the kitchen, the room where I usually spent hours serving them like their personal maid. But tonight would be different. Tonight, no aroma of a delicious meal would waft from this kitchen. Tonight, this kitchen would become the place where I prepared their ruin. Once inside, I shut the door firmly. I leaned my back against it and closed my eyes for a moment, gathering my strength. The sting on my cheek was still there, but the pain in my heart was far more unbearable. During our 5 years of marriage, I had always tried to be a devoted wife. I turned a blind eye to Kevin's laziness. I endured Sharon's criticisms and gave in to Tiffany's whims. I thought that with patience, they would change. How wrong I was. My patience had only fed the monsters within them. They grew greedier, crueler, and more shameless. I opened my eyes. The tears I'd held back were dry. They weren't worth crying over. Parasites. I went to a drawer in the corner of the kitchen, where I kept important things I'd been hiding. Enough was enough. This family drama had to end tonight. The sound of a knife hitting a cutting board echoed sharply. Chop, chop, chop. The rhythm filled the kitchen, piercing the walls and reaching the living room. I knew exactly what they were thinking out there. They were probably smirking, feeling victorious for having bent my will once again. They must have thought the foolish, frightened wife was hurriedly dicing onions or mincing meat to satisfy their pampered stomachs. But on the kitchen counter, there wasn't a single ingredient. The large chef's knife was just striking the empty wooden board over and over. It was part of the performance. I wanted them to feel on top of the world before I plunged them into the deepest abyss. While my one hand made the fake chopping sounds, my other was busy preparing the real dish. I took out a large silver platter we normally only used for Thanksgiving or major family celebrations. The platter gleamed under the kitchen lights. I placed nothing on it, no roasted chicken, no mashed potatoes. There was no pot roast, no savory soup, no sautéed vegetables they usually demanded. Instead, I pulled a thick file folder from a hidden compartment under the sink, a folder I had been preparing for 3 months, waiting for the right moment. I opened it and took out 3 key documents. First, the deed to this house. The house had been purchased with my savings. However, Kevin had insisted his name be on the deed as well, so he could feel valued as the head of the household. But last month, after I paid off the final mortgage payment with my annual bonus, I secretly had the title transferred solely into my name. The process was complex and costly, but thankfully, I had a trusted real estate lawyer who worked quickly and discreetly, without Kevin ever finding out. This document was proof that every brick, every tile, and every inch of this property belonged to me. Second, the divorce papers. Already filled out and signed by me. It detailed all the grounds for divorce: verbal abuse, physical abuse, the kind that had just occurred and was thankfully recorded by the security camera I'd installed in the living room last week, and economic abandonment. I was done supporting a man whose only talent was giving orders. Third, a stack of bank statements as thick as a novel. I had used a highlighter to mark every single transfer that had gone from my account to fund their lifestyle. The payments for Kevin's SUV, the monthly allowance for Sharon's social lunches, Tiffany's credit card bills for designer bags and shoes, and even the cash for Kevin's cigarettes and gas. It was all meticulously recorded. The sum was astronomical, enough to buy a small condo outright. This was the irrefutable proof that I was the economic pillar of this family, not Kevin. I arranged the 3 documents carefully on the platter, the deed in the center, the divorce petition to the left, and the bank statements to the right. Then, I covered it all with a gleaming silver cloche. Perfect. On the outside, it looked like a 5-star dinner service. I checked my watch. Exactly 20 minutes had passed. It was time for the main event. I lifted the platter with both hands. It wasn't as heavy as the burden I had carried all these years, and yet it felt like the most beautiful weight I had ever held. I took a deep breath, composed my face into a mask of indifference, and pushed open the kitchen door. In the dining room, the three of them were already seated around the table. Their faces radiated impatience, knives and forks in hand, ready to devour whatever I had prepared. When they saw me emerge with the large covered platter, Sharon's eyes lit up. "That's more like it," she said condescendingly, settling back in her chair. "A wife has to be diligent. It's not enough to just make money. Her husband's and mother-in-law's stomachs come first." Kevin grunted, his face still sour from his earlier rage. "Took you long enough. This better be worth the wait. If it's bland, get ready to cook again." Tiffany even craned her neck. "What's under there, sis-in-law? Weird that I can't smell anything. You didn't just make pasta, did you?" I didn't say a word. I placed the platter right in the center of the table with a slow, solemn movement. The clink of the silver tray on the glass tabletop made them fall silent for a moment. I stood at the head of the table, looking at them one by one, with an expression that made Kevin frown. Perhaps he sensed the drastic shift in my aura. "Go ahead," I said curtly. "This is the best dish I can offer you tonight. Eat your fill." Impatient, Kevin reached out and yanked the silver cloche off. Let's see what his sentence died in his throat. The sound of the cloche being dropped on the table echoed loudly in the sudden, tense silence. There was no hot steam, no fragrant aroma of spices to whet their appetites. On the platter, there was only a stack of papers. Kevin's eyes widened. He squinted, trying to read the document on top. His face, once red with rage, slowly turned pale as he recognized the letterhead and the title. "What the hell is this?" His voice trembled, not with anger, but with confusion and a dawning panic. Sharon, who was farsighted, grabbed the thickest stack of papers. "Where's the food? Why are you giving us newspapers? Have you gone crazy, Emily?" But when she saw the highlighted figures on the bank statements, her eyes bulged. What is this?" Tiffany, quicker on the uptake, snatched the divorce papers, scanned them, and then looked at me, her mouth agape. "Kevin, Emily wants a divorce!" she shrieked hysterically. The situation exploded immediately. Kevin slammed the deed down on the table. He shot to his feet, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Divorce papers? Who the hell do you think you are to divorce me, you ungrateful wife? And this deed? Why is it only in your name? Where's my name? You tricked me." I smiled. A very sweet smile, but one that felt cold and sharp. "Eat your reality, Kevin, Sharon, Tiffany. Feast your eyes on those numbers. That's how much of my money you've been devouring all this time." I looked directly at Kevin. "This house is legally mine. The original deed was placed in a bank safe deposit box this morning. That's just a copy, so tearing it up is pointless." Then I turned to Sharon, who was trembling as she held the bank statements. "And as of this moment, I am kicking all of you out of my house." "By what right do you kick us out?" Sharon screamed, her voice so high it made my ears ring. "This is my son's house. Kevin is the man of this house. You're just living in it." "Man of the house?" I laughed softly, a bitter sound. What kind of man of the house lives off his wife's money? What kind of man of the house lets his own mother insult his wife? For your information, Sharon, Kevin hasn't contributed a single dime to this household in over a year. Even the electricity powering that lamp above your head is paid for by me. Kevin growled, his fists clenched, ready to strike me again. He started to circle the table, approaching me with the clear intent to harm. "You take back what you said, or you'll what?" I challenged him. I didn't take a single step back. Instead, I lifted my chin, daring him. "You want to hit me again? Go ahead. The security camera in that corner already recorded your slap in the living room. One more touch, and the footage will be automatically uploaded to the cloud and sent to my lawyer's phone. On top of the divorce, do you want to add a criminal charge for domestic assault?" Kevin stopped in his tracks. He looked up and saw the small camera with a blinking red light in the corner of the room. His face morphed into a mixture of fear and profound hatred. He realized he had walked right into my trap. "Out," I said coldly. "Now." The silence my threat had created lasted only a few seconds before it shattered into a deafening uproar. Sharon was the first to lose control. The old woman, who normally curated her image as an elegant lady for her friends, was now howling like a banshee. She swept all the papers off the table with her wrinkled hands, scattering them across the floor. Her face was soaked with tears of rage, not sorrow. Her pride had been trampled by the daughter-in-law she had always considered little more than a walking ATM. She couldn't accept the reality that the luxury she enjoyed was about to vanish in an instant. Sharon slammed her palms on the dining table again and again. Her voice was hoarse as she screamed accusations at me, calling me a swindler. She claimed I had manipulated Kevin, used black magic, or tricked her son in a moment of weakness to seize his assets. Her accusations were ludicrous. How could I trick Kevin out of assets he never had? Everything in this house, from the silverware to the SUV in the garage, had been bought with my own hard-earned money. But logic rarely applies to those panicking at the loss of their meal ticket. Kevin, who had been frozen by the threat of the camera, now paced the dining room like a caged tiger. He ran his hands through his hair in frustration, his wild eyes searching for an escape, a way to turn the tables. He picked up the crumpled copy of the deed from the floor, balled it up, and threw it at me. The impact was soft, barely bouncing off my shoulder, but it demonstrated his impotence. He knew he had no legal ground to stand on. The documents were real, the bank statements were authentic, and he knew damn well he'd been living off me for years. Tiffany, my spoiled sister-in-law, reacted differently but just as irritatingly. She didn't scream or rage. Instead, she burst into hysterical sobs, clutching the designer handbag she had bought last week with my credit card, of course. She begged her brother to do something. She was terrified of being homeless, of no longer being able to show off on social media, of her friends finding out she wasn't actually rich. Her pathetic wailing gave me a headache, but at the same time, it brought a strange satisfaction. Finally, that girl was feeling a fear of the future, the same fear that had plagued me every time I saw her credit card bills. I let them vent for a few minutes. I remained motionless at the end of the table, arms crossed, enjoying the spectacle of a family of parasites destroying itself. When I decided it was enough, I walked to a corner of the room where I had hidden something behind the long drapes. I pulled out 3 large black trash bags, the heavy-duty kind, stuffed to the brim. I dragged them to the center of the room. The sound of plastic scraping against the tile floor made them turn. With all my strength, I threw the bags at them, one by one. Thump, thump, thump. The 3 enormous bags landed at their feet. Kevin flinched in surprise. Sharon stopped howling, and Tiffany paused her crying. They stared at the trash bags in confusion. A faint smell of mothballs and dust emanated from them. "That's your stuff," I said, my tone flat and emotionless. "I packed it this afternoon while you were out shopping. Clothes, pants, shoes, and any personal items I deemed important are in there. The rest, what I considered junk or things I bought with my money that you don't deserve to take, has been thrown in the dumpster or set aside to be sold. Don't bother going up to your rooms. They're already locked, and I've thrown away the keys. You have no access to any other part of this house except this dining room and the front door." Tiffany shrieked and tore open one of the plastic bags. The contents spilled onto the floor, clothes wrinkled and haphazardly rolled up, several pairs of shoes piled together without their boxes, and cosmetics thrown in without a bag. She cried even harder seeing her collection of expensive clothes treated like garbage. She protested that her clothes would be ruined, but I didn't care. To me, they were just junk that needed to be cleared out of my house as soon as possible. Sharon stared at me in disbelief, as if I had just turned into a monster. She clutched her chest, faking a heart attack. She started breathing heavily, hoping I would soften and call off the eviction. That trick used to work every time. Whenever I got angry, she would pretend to be ill, and I would end up apologizing and taking care of her. But this time, I just looked at her coldly. I knew the results of her checkup from last month. Her heart was perfectly healthy. The only thing sick was her soul, filled with envy and spite. Kevin tried to approach me again, this time with a pleading, fake tone. He lowered his voice and tried to touch my hand, but I snatched it away. He started talking about our good memories, the vows we made, what the neighbors would say if we got divorced. He was trying to manipulate my feelings using his old weapons, pity and fear of gossip. But he forgot that a woman's heart, wounded repeatedly, eventually freezes over and becomes as hard as a rock. There were no more cracks for Kevin to slip through. I glanced at my watch. 5 minutes had passed since my ultimatum. I pulled my phone from my pocket, tapped the screen a few times, and showed them the screen displaying the emergency call button for the community's security gate. I looked at Kevin, giving him one final, non-negotiable warning. My patience was gone, and I wouldn't waste another minute on this cheap drama. "Now, pick up those trash bags and drag them out of my house," I ordered firmly. "If you are still here in 10 seconds, I'm pressing this button. The security guards will come and forcibly remove you." Imagine the shame of being dragged out like burglars in front of all the neighbors. The choice is yours. Walk out on your own 2 feet with what little dignity you have left? Or be forced out with a free show for the entire neighborhood? 1, 2, 3. Kevin was paralyzed. His face was as white as a sheet. He looked at me, searching for any doubt in my eyes, but found none. He saw deadly seriousness. With trembling hands, he grabbed one of the large plastic bags. He yelled at Tiffany to stop crying and help him carry the stuff. He also pulled his mother's arm, who was still faking an asthma attack, to get her to stand up. They finally realized I wasn't bluffing. The queen of the house had awakened, and her orders were absolute. The heavy oak front door swung open, revealing the dense darkness of the night. A strong wind gusted inside, carrying the first drops of a heavy rain that was just beginning to fall. The sky itself seemed to bless my plan to cleanse the house of all its filth, as a storm broke just as they took their first step outside. A clap of thunder rumbled in the distance, matching the beat of my heart, which was racing with adrenaline. I stood in the doorway, ensuring they left with their trash bags full of their meager belongings. Kevin went first, hauling a large black plastic bag over his shoulder. He looked pathetic, a far cry from the arrogant husband who had slapped me earlier. His shirt was soaked from the rain, his hair plastered to his head, and his face was downcast, hiding his rage and shame. Behind him, Tiffany dragged her bag reluctantly, cursing under her breath every time the plastic snagged on the paving stones of the walkway. Sharon walked with difficulty, carrying nothing, trying to maintain the last vestiges of her pride with her chin held high, though her body was beginning to tremble from the cold night wind. The moment Sharon's last foot crossed the threshold, I slammed the door shut. Boom! The sound became the final punctuation mark on a dark chapter of my life. I threw the deadbolt and put on the security chain. Loud banging started from outside. Seconds later, Kevin began screaming my name, then insulting me, then begging. His voice was muffled, drowned out by the sound of the rain, which was now pounding harder against the roof. I didn't flinch. I went to the front window and pulled back the curtains slightly to peek. In the front yard, the 3 of them stood shivering. The rain was now a torrential downpour, soaking them in seconds. The trash bags were dripping, looking even more miserable. Kevin was still banging on the door, hoping I would soften at the sight of their plight. He was wrong. Seeing them drenched actually soothed the wounds in my heart. It was instant karma for how they had treated me for years. Hadn't they often left me standing in the rain waiting for a cab after work while Kevin took my car to hang out with his friends? Now they could feel the cold water seeping into their bones. The commotion on my porch attracted the neighbors' attention. Lights in the houses on either side began to flick on. Some opened their windows or stepped onto their balconies to see what was happening. Kevin, realizing he had an audience, instantly changed tactics. He stopped shouting insults and started yelling in a pitiful tone, trying to play the victim. He shouted to the neighbors that I was a heartless wife who had thrown her husband and sick mother-in-law out in the middle of the night. He was acting like the aggrieved party, hoping public sympathy would force me to open the door. "Help! Please help us! My wife has gone crazy! My mother has a heart condition! Please, don't let us die out here!" Kevin yelled, pointing at my front door. Sharon, whose dramatic instincts were sharp, collapsed onto the wet porch, pretending to faint. Tiffany knelt beside her, shaking her mother's body while wailing loudly, creating a soap opera scene. Some neighbors started to whisper. The head of the homeowners association, who lived 3 houses down, started walking over with an umbrella. I knew I couldn't just stand by and let Kevin twist the narrative. I grabbed my phone and called the main security gate. The phone rang twice before the deep voice of Miller, the head of security, answered. I asked him to come to my house immediately with his team, explaining there was a public disturbance. I told him some strangers were causing a scene on my porch and disrupting the peace of the community. A few moments later, 2 security patrol cars appeared, their blue lights flashing. Miller and 2 of his men got out quickly. They approached the porch where Kevin's family drama was unfolding. I gathered my courage and opened the door just a crack, enough to speak to Miller without letting Kevin force his way in. "Mr. Miller, please remove these people," I said loudly, my voice cutting through the rain so the spying neighbors could hear. "They no longer live in this house. We have separated, and the house is my property, as stated on the deed. They are trying to break in and are causing a disturbance. Please escort them out of the community." Kevin's jaw dropped. He tried to defend himself to Miller. "Sir, this is my house. My wife is just upset. Please, don't listen to her." But Miller was a professional who had worked here a long time. He knew perfectly well who paid the hefty HOA and security fees on time every month. Me, not Kevin. He had also seen Kevin come home drunk many times or host loud parties that the neighbors complained about. Miller's sympathy was clearly not with Kevin. "I'm sorry, Mr. Evans. Mrs. Evans is the legal owner of this property, and she has asked you to leave. Please don't cause any more trouble at this hour," Miller said firmly, taking Kevin by the arm. "We will escort you to the exit." Kevin tried to resist, but the two burly guards were much stronger. Sharon, who had been pretending to be unconscious, suddenly recovered and scrambled to her feet, afraid of being forcibly lifted. They were escorted off my property like detainees. Kevin's face was red with shame, being the center of attention for the neighbors who now looked at him with contempt. His victim act had failed spectacularly. When they reached the gate, Kevin suddenly remembered something. He stopped and turned, shouting at me as I still stood in the doorway. "The car keys! Where are the car keys?" "My wallet and the keys are still inside. Throw them to me. At least let us drive away." I smiled wryly and slowly shook my head. I took a step forward so he could see my face clearly under the porch light. "The car? What car, Kevin?" "The black SUV?" I asked in a falsely innocent tone. "Just so you know, the title for that car is in my name. I finished paying it off last month with my bonus. So, it's my car. And I've hidden the keys where you'll never find them. You have no right to that vehicle whatsoever." But I need a car. Where are we supposed to go in this rain?" Kevin yelled in frustration, his voice breaking in the downpour. "That's no longer my problem," I replied coldly. "You can walk. A little exercise wouldn't hurt. Or call a cab. Oh, wait. I forgot your wallet is inside. And all the credit cards in that wallet are supplementary to my account, which I canceled from my banking app 5 minutes ago. So that wallet is useless to you." Kevin stood there in stunned silence, his face ashen. He had just realized the full extent of his ruin. No house, no car, not a single penny to his name. Miller gestured for his men to keep moving. "Come on, sir, let's go. Don't bother Mrs. Evans anymore," the guard warned. Kevin, Sharon, and Tiffany finally gave up, dragged away from the luxurious home where they had lived like parasites. They trudged through the torrential rain, hauling the black trash bags that were now their only possessions. I closed the door again and locked it. The rain continued to pour outside, but inside my house, it was peaceful and warm. For the first time in 5 years, I felt like I had truly come home. A massive weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I leaned my back against the door, let out a long sigh, and smiled. Tonight, I was going to sleep deeply, very deeply. The gates of the luxurious community closed behind them, a wall separating the comfortable life they had just lost from the earthly hell that now welcomed them. The rain didn't let up. If anything, it intensified with an icy wind that chilled them to the bone. Kevin, Sharon, and Tiffany shivered on the side of a lonely road. There was no shelter, save for some leafy trees that only seemed to drip more water on them. They looked like sewer rats washed up by a flood, wet, filthy, and miserable. The black trash bags, their only fortune, felt heavier as they filled with water through the poorly tied knots. They walked aimlessly along the flooded sidewalk. The dim light from the street lamps illuminated their desperate faces. For the 10th time, Kevin checked his pockets, hoping for a miracle in the form of a forgotten bill or a stray debit card, but there was nothing. His expensive leather wallet, with his ID, driver's license, and bank cards, was sitting on the nightstand back in the house. Emily had planned everything perfectly. Without that wallet, Kevin was nobody. He couldn't rent a hotel room, buy food, or even get a hot coffee at a diner. His identity and access to money were locked away in the house that was now forbidden to him. Sharon started to become delirious from the cold. Her teeth chattered, and her lips turned blue. The woman who had always been impeccably made up now looked old and frail. The rain had washed away her makeup, leaving her with a ghoulish look, black streaks running down from her eyes. She blamed Kevin, her voice hoarse and lost in the sound of the rain. She cursed her son's stupidity for not knowing how to control his wife. In Sharon's twisted logic, this was all happening because Kevin hadn't been tough enough in training Emily, not because they had oppressed her for years. Tiffany stumbled behind them. The heel of one of her stilettos had snapped when she stepped in a pothole, forcing her to limp while carrying the now useless, expensive shoe. Eventually, they found a closed strip mall with an awning wide enough to offer some shelter. Without a word, they collapsed onto the cold, dusty concrete. Kevin leaned his back against a cold metal security gate. His stomach roared. Hunger was beginning to set in brutally. The last time they had eaten was lunch, and they had been anticipating the feast Emily was supposed to prepare. Ironically, they had received an unforgettable dish, just not an edible one. The image of a hot plate of food now danced in his mind, torturing him. Tiffany pulled out her phone, the screen slightly cracked from being banged around in the trash bag. She tried to order a Lyft with the 10% battery she had left. However, her finger hovered over the confirm button when she realized the payment method was linked directly to Emily's supplementary credit card. With trembling hands, she tried anyway. A transaction failed notification popped up immediately. Emily had blocked everything. Tiffany then tried calling her high society friends, hoping one would help. The first call went to voicemail. The second was rejected. The third was answered by a friend, Jessica. But as soon as Tiffany explained she'd been kicked out and needed money, Jessica claimed she had a bad connection and hung up. Tiffany smashed her phone on the ground in frustration and burst into tears, hugging her knees. The night felt terribly long and torturous. They couldn't sleep. Mosquitoes bit their damp skin. The occasional sound of passing cars startled them. Every time a luxury car drove by, Kevin's heart ached, reminding him of his black SUV, now parked comfortably in Emily's garage. In the early morning silence, Sharon complained of a sharp stomach pain from the cold and hunger. There was no medicine, no blankets, no hot water. Kevin could only look at his mother with empty eyes. A flicker of guilt started to surface, but his massive ego quickly snuffed it out, replacing it with renewed hatred for Emily. He swore he would get revenge as soon as the sun came up. Dawn finally broke. The sunlight was blinding but offered no warmth to their hearts. Their bodies were stiff and sore. A damp, musty smell rose from their clothes, which had dried on them overnight. Passers-by looked at them with disgust, assuming they were the area's newest homeless people. An employee arriving to open a store shooed them away, throwing a bucket of dirty water at their feet to make them leave. With their dignity in tatters, they dragged their belongings to a bench in a nearby public park. As they sat there, enduring an ever-growing hunger, Tiffany, out of boredom, opened her social media with the last dregs of her mobile data. Her eyes widened at Emily's latest Instagram story, posted just 15 minutes ago. Tiffany showed the screen to Kevin and Sharon. It was a photo of a bowl of artisanal granola with fresh berries and a steaming latte with perfect foam art, set against the backdrop of a clean, modern apartment. In the corner of the photo, a small caption, "The best breakfast is a parasite-free breakfast. Number grateful, number blessed." Seeing the photo, Kevin's stomach churned violently, not just from hunger, but from the envy and rage that erupted in his chest. Emily was enjoying her life while they were suffering on the street like garbage. The reality of life without his wife's wallet was terrifying. The world was no longer kind, and they were just worthless specks of dust. Kevin decided he couldn't give up. He still had a job. Yes, he was still a marketing manager at an office supply distributor. Though his position wasn't very senior and his salary was mediocre, he often blew it on small online bets he hid from Emily. He figured if he could get to the office, he could ask for a paycheck advance or a loan from a coworker to rent a temporary room for his mother and sister. He had to salvage what was left of his dignity as a man. He left Sharon and Tiffany at the park, promising to return with money and food by lunchtime. With sheer determination, he walked the 2 miles to his office. He stopped at a public restroom to wash his face and fix his hair. Although he couldn't get the musty smell out of his wrinkled shirt, he wiped his muddy shoes as best he could with a damp paper towel. He looked far from a manager, but he had no other choice. Upon arriving at the office lobby, the receptionist eyed him with a frown. Normally, Kevin arrived in an impeccable suit, smelling of expensive cologne, with a polished air thanks to Emily's care. Today, he looked like he had survived a natural disaster. Kevin ignored her strange look and headed straight for the elevator. Inside, two employees from another department subtly covered their noses and whispered while glancing at him. Kevin pretended not to notice, staring ahead with a tense face. His heart pounded, terrified his sudden poverty would be exposed. As soon as he reached his desk, before he could even sit down, an HR employee was already there, her face serious. "Mr. Evans, the director and the head of HR are waiting for you in the conference room. Now," she said without a smile. Kevin had a bad feeling. A sudden summons like this was never a good sign. With weary steps, he followed her to the conference room at the end of the hall. Inside, the CEO and the HR director were seated, a pile of documents on the table. Their faces were cold, devoid of any kindness. Kevin sat in the indicated chair, trying to smile though his lips were trembling. "What's going on, gentlemen? Strange to be called in so early," he asked, trying to sound casual. The director slid a blue folder across the table. "Let's not beat around the bush, Kevin. We've been conducting an internal audit for the past week, and we've found numerous irregularities in the expense reports from the marketing team you manage." Kevin's heart stopped. He opened the folder with sweaty hands. Inside was evidence of embezzled operational funds, forged gas receipts, and even inflated invoices from client dinners that never happened. For a long time, Kevin had been skimming small amounts from the company to fund his lifestyle or pay off gambling debts. Previously, whenever there was a discrepancy, Emily, who worked as a CPA at a prestigious firm that happened to be this company's external auditor, would often help him fix the reports or even cover the losses with her own money to save his career. Emily did it to protect her husband's reputation, but now that protective shield was gone. Clearly, Emily was no longer covering for him. In fact, she might have been the one who tipped off the internal auditors to look closer at his department. "I can explain, sir. It's just a clerical error," Kevin stammered, panicking. Cold sweat ran down his temples. "A clerical error?" the HR director scoffed. $50,000 has gone missing in 6 months, and you call it a clerical error? We've already checked with the restaurants and gas stations you listed. All of these receipts are fake. And worse, we've received information that you've been using company resources for personal use." "Mr. Evans," the CEO interrupted, his voice firm and thunderous. "The company cannot tolerate this kind of criminal activity. As of this moment, you are terminated, effective immediately. You will not receive any severance pay, as the losses you've caused exceed your entitlements. And one more thing. If you do not return the $50,000 within the next 48 hours, we will be taking this matter to the authorities. The police will come looking for you." Kevin's world collapsed. Fired. No severance, threatened with prison. He slumped in his chair, strength gone. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. It was over. The only lifeline he had left had just been severed. He tried to beg, even getting on his knees at his director's feet, crying and shouting, forgetting all his dignity. But the decision was final. 2 security guards were called to escort him out of the building. The scene from the previous night was repeating itself, this time at his workplace. Kevin was walked past the desks of his colleagues, who stared at him with a mix of shock and contempt. Whispers followed him. The news of his corruption spread like wildfire. He was forced to pack his personal belongings into an empty cardboard box. There wasn't much of value on his desk, just a framed photo of himself looking successful. As Kevin exited the office building lobby, box in hand, he saw something that squeezed his chest until he couldn't breathe. A sleek, silver luxury sedan pulled up to the VIP entrance of the much more prestigious business tower next door. The car door opened, and a woman he knew very well stepped out. It was Emily. But this was a different Emily. She wore a chic, modern pantsuit. Her hair was styled perfectly, and she wore sunglasses that gave her an air of sophistication. She walked with confidence, flanked by 2 assistants carrying her briefcase. Emily was heading to a meeting with an important client. Her career was soaring. Kevin wanted to scream her name, to run after her, but his feet felt nailed to the floor. He saw his own reflection in the building's glass, disheveled, dirty, smelly, holding a cardboard box. Meanwhile, Emily shone like a freshly polished diamond. At that moment, Emily turned her head and gave him a fleeting glance. From behind her sunglasses, Kevin could feel a sharp, penetrating gaze. She didn't stop, didn't greet him, didn't even show surprise. She simply looked away and continued into the skyscraper, leaving Kevin paralyzed on the sidewalk, a complete and utter loser. The ruin of his career was the perfect complement to his suffering, while the woman he had scorned was now flying high, untouchable. Kevin walked back to the park with heavy steps, as if dragging 100-pound shackles. The midday sun beat down on him. He clutched the cardboard box, a symbol of his failure. All the way back, his stomach growled, but the hunger was nothing compared to the fear that now gripped him. He had to face his mother and sister empty-handed, with no money, no food, and the news that he was now an unemployed man with a criminal record at his company. When he reached the park, he found a desolate scene. Sharon and Tiffany were huddled on a peeling park bench. Sharon was massaging her swollen feet, while Tiffany fanned her annoyed face with a piece of cardboard. When they saw Kevin, their faces lit up for a second. The hope of a sandwich and some fresh water shone in their eyes. Tiffany even jumped up to greet him, hand outstretched. But that hope was shattered when Kevin arrived and dropped the box on the ground with a dull thud. He couldn't meet their eyes. He told them everything, his voice cracking. The firing, the audit, the threat of jail, the lack of severance. A dense silence fell, and then the fury erupted. Sharon screamed hysterically, hitting Kevin's arm, blaming her golden child for being so stupid. Tiffany was no less cruel. She kicked the box, scattering its contents, calling her brother a useless failure. In this extreme situation, the mask of a united family they had always worn for Emily completely crumbled. There was only the survival instinct of selfish individuals, blaming each other for their sudden poverty. Desperate, Kevin took off his designer watch, the last valuable item he owned. He demanded Tiffany's gold earrings. After a fight, she relinquished them. Kevin went to a pawn shop and sold the items for a pittance, barely enough for a few days of cheap food and a week's rent in a tiny room in a slum. They rented a grimy, windowless room in a foul-smelling alley. The walls were damp with mold. The shared bathroom was disgusting. For Sharon and Tiffany, used to Emily's luxurious home, it was hell. They ate cheap Chinese takeout in silence, the air thick with mutual hatred. That night, exhaustion claimed Kevin and Sharon. But Tiffany lay awake, staring at the spiderweb-covered ceiling. She looked with disgust at her sleeping mother and brother. She felt she deserved better. The devil on her shoulder whispered, if she stayed, the money would be gone in a week, but if she took it for herself, she could escape to another city, find a new man to leech off of. Slowly, carefully, Tiffany slid her hand under Kevin's pillow. Her heart pounded. She felt the envelope of cash and gently pulled it out. Kevin stirred, and she froze, but he just rolled over. With the money secured, Tiffany silently packed her bag. Without a backward glance at the family she was betraying, she slipped out of the room and vanished into the dark alley, taking their only hope of survival with her. The next morning, Kevin's screams woke the building. The money was gone. Tiffany was gone. Sharon at first refused to believe it, but the reality was undeniable. Their daughter and sister had abandoned them. As Kevin raged, punching the moldy wall until his knuckles bled, the landlord burst in, furious about the noise. Seeing Kevin out of control and unable to pay the rest of the week's rent, he threw them out on the spot. Now they had absolutely nothing. Zero. The shock of her daughter's betrayal shattered Sharon's health. She was pale and weak. Kevin had to support her as they wandered the hot streets. In a final, desperate act, he led his mother on the long walk back to Emily's neighborhood. Maybe, he thought, she would have cooled down. Maybe she'd feel pity seeing his mother's state. They arrived at dusk, looking like beggars. The security guard recognized them but let them stand across the street. The house was dark and quiet. Emily's SUV wasn't in the driveway, and then Kevin saw it, something that made his knees buckle. A large yellow sign was staked into the pristine lawn, with bold red letters, "For Sale." Emily hadn't just kicked them out. She was erasing every trace of them. The house was empty. She was gone, taking her success and happiness with her, leaving Kevin and his mother utterly alone in a cruel world. Kevin collapsed onto the asphalt, hugging his mother's legs and weeping silently in the shadow of the house he once took for granted. For Emily, the days following the eviction were filled with a healing silence. No more shouts for coffee, no more loud soap operas, no more complaints about the food. The house was so quiet she could hear the ticking of the clock. At first, it was strange, but soon it became the peace she had craved for 5 years. She hired a professional cleaning crew to deep clean every corner, erasing their scent. Then, she called a real estate agent. Though she'd paid for it with her blood, sweat, and tears, the house held too many bad memories. It sold in 2 weeks for a handsome price. With that money and her savings, she bought a luxury penthouse in the heart of the city. It was smaller but far more modern, with top-tier security. From her 30th floor window, she could see the city lights, a symbol of her bright future. Her career took off. Free from the draining family drama, she poured herself into her work. The audit project was a massive success, and she was promoted to senior partner at her firm. It came with a company car, a personal assistant, and a significant salary increase. Her style changed. She donated the plain clothes she used to wear and filled her closet with designer suits. Her face, once tired, now glowed. Friends said she looked 10 years younger. The divorce was a swift formality in court. Kevin never showed up, so the judge granted it in his absence. When the gavel fell, Emily didn't cry. She smiled, relieved. As she left the courthouse, she received a text from an unknown number. "Emily, it's Kevin. I'm using a stranger's phone. Please help me. My mother is very sick. We're sleeping on the street. Tiffany ran off with our money. I feel like I'm going to die. I swear I'll change. Let us come back. Is there any love left in your heart for me?" Emily read the message without emotion. She felt no pity, no urge to help, only disgust. She remembered Kevin leaving her with a high fever to go fishing. She remembered Sharon throwing away a meal she'd cooked because it was a little bland. She remembered the last slap. Love? That love had been murdered by them over and over again. Without replying, Emily blocked the number and deleted the message. She walked to her window and looked out at the glittering city. Somewhere in a dark corner, Kevin was crying over his fate, but that was no longer her problem. He had chosen to be a lazy abuser when he had everything. Now he had to live with the consequences of being a loser with nothing. Emily breathed in the fresh air of freedom. She was whole, she was strong, and she was happy on her own. 1 year later, a lavish event hall downtown was splendidly decorated. It was the launch party for Emily's 5th boutique and the inauguration of the charitable foundation she'd created to help women who were victims of domestic violence. A radiant Emily cut the inaugural ribbon, wearing an elegant dress she had designed herself. She was no longer an oppressed woman but a symbol of resilience and success. After the ceremony, a charity drive began. The distribution of 1,000 hot meals and financial aid packets to people in need. Emily insisted on handing them out personally. A long line of people waited patiently. Emily gave each person a package and an envelope with a kind smile until it was the turn of a skeletal man pushing an old wheelchair. The man was in filthy, torn clothes. A pungent odor emanated from him. In the wheelchair sat an old woman in an even more pitiful state, her eyes vacant. Emily offered him the meal and the envelope. "Here you are, sir. I hope this is a blessing to you and your mother." The man didn't take it immediately. His trembling hand froze. He looked down at Emily's designer heels, then slowly raised his face. His sunken eyes met hers. Time seemed to stop. Emily?" His voice was barely a whisper. Emily studied him. Despite the grime and suffering, she recognized him. It was Kevin, and the old woman was Sharon. Her ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law stood before her as beggars, waiting for her charity. Emily's heart beat steadily. She felt no anger, no resentment, not even pity, just a void, a total indifference. They were strangers. Kevin had expected a reaction, shouting, crying, anything. He wanted to fall to his knees, to beg for forgiveness. But Emily did none of that. She gave him a polite, professional nod, her smile never faltering. She placed the meal and the envelope into Kevin's trembling hand and turned to the next person in line. "Please move along, sir. There's a long line." Kevin's heart shattered. Her indifference was the most painful punishment of all, to be invisible, to be irrelevant. A security guard gently asked him to move. Stunned, Kevin pushed his mother's wheelchair away. They stopped on the curb across the street. He watched Emily get into a black luxury sedan, a chauffeur holding the door for her. The car pulled away, carrying her toward her brilliant life, without a single look back. Kevin opened the food container. Inside was roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans, the most luxurious meal he had seen in a year. He fed a spoonful to his mother, who grabbed at it greedily and then took a bite himself. It tasted delicious, but it was mixed with the salty taste of the tears streaming down his cheeks. He wept uncontrollably in the middle of the street, clutching the food box as if it were his only connection to the past. Regret had come far too late. He had thrown away a diamond for a handful of sharp stones, and now those stones had bled him dry. The door to forgiveness wasn't just locked, the owner had moved into a palace far more beautiful. The perfect revenge isn't rage, but becoming so happy, so successful, and so peaceful that the existence of those who harmed you becomes completely and utterly irrelevant. Their ruin was just a minor footnote in the epic novel of her success.